How was Stephanie? Ha ha ha! I've had coffee, so this video is gonna rock. Alright, so what are we doing today? This is interesting. I am a YouTube language learning vlogger junkie. It's part of what inspired me to start doing this channel. As I started watching people that were learning languages and they were documenting their progress along the way. And as a former language teacher, I found that really interesting. When I saw Shannon at Eurolinguiste with an E at the end, I'll put the link in the show notes below. She did a video June 21st in 2015. I just saw it last week because I'm in massive catch-up mode. When I find somebody and they're like 2 or 3 years into their vlogging experience, it takes me a while to catch up. You know how it is. Anyway, so I saw that and I thought, oh gosh, it's like 2 years. It's 2 years old. But what she did in that video is somebody tagged her. You know these kinds of things, right? Somebody tags you and you have to answer a certain list of questions, and then you have to name 2 people to answer the same questions. And so you're passing along that type of video. And so this one was language learning questions. And I thought, oh, I love this type of thing, and I want to be, I've been talking to some people in the language learning vlogging community, but I really haven't made as many connections as I'd like to. I'm watching them, but I don't know if they're watching me, and I would like to have some people within that vlogging community to talk to about the bizarreness of vlogging your language learning, the bizarreness and the beauty of vlogging your language learning process. So in order to thrust myself into this environment, I will tell you very transparently that I put a comment on her video and I said, would you please tag me? I love this. And so of course, because she is a kind-hearted soul, in addition to being brilliant and making a really good language learning vlogging channel, she said, yes, consider yourself tagged. Here we go. So there are 11 questions, and so when I awkwardly look over this way, I'm looking at what the question is. I'm trying not to wear these puppies because check out this glare, right? Can you even see me through this? So I try not to do that. Okay, so number one, what do you consider to be your native language? I did an entire video on this, and I'll put it in the show notes along with the questions. But if we define my native language as the language that I first played with, the language that I first remember making my own and creating things from it and kind of taking the grammar rules and switching them around and making up new words and things, we'd have to say English. I'm not sure that's the definition of native language. I truly despise the term native language. For example, for people who grew up speaking, and there are people like this, 2 or 3 languages, when you say, what's your native language, what are they supposed to say? I'm not that person. I'm so not that person. I'm someone who supposedly started speaking Italian first at home and then refused once I went to school and then learned English. I do not remember any of this because this apparently happened before I went to kindergarten, and those memories are scarce. They're very few, but apparently Italian might be my native language, but I do not remember speaking it. Yeah, so we'll just say English because that's the first one that I played with and had some fun with and felt like I could have a private experience with. Number 2, what was your first language learning experience? I literally just did this video like 3 days ago. So I'm just going to put a link to that. It was learning German in high school, and every cringing opportunity you can think of in a high school environment with teenagers learning a language that's that difficult, it existed. So I'll leave that just in the link below. Number 3, where did number 3 go? There we go. What languages did you study and why did you start them? So German was first. I needed to study a language in high school. It was a requirement. Then I needed to study a language at my community college. What did I pick? Oh, I picked Italian because I thought I wanted to get the requirement over, and I thought my heritage would come through. Both my parents are Italian, and they both immigrated to America at different times, and then they met in New York City in a hair salon school, or whatever that's called, beautician school, started their own beauty school. This is the story I know of. Anyway, and then they left the city and had, they had the three of us, my brother, my sister, and I, and then we moved to Long Island, then we moved to Pennsylvania, and that's where I cried for 8 years. Sorry, I'm not a huge fan of rural areas, and we lived in a very small town. What was the question? What languages did you study and why? So I needed to study a language in my community college, and I remembered the first language learning experience in high school and how excruciating that was, and I just wanted to get it over with so I could go to the classes I wanted to go to and get the degree I wanted to get. So I picked Italian because I was hoping that some of that supposed maybe first language would come through. It did not. Although I did have a really nice professor who was more interested in getting us interested in learning Italian than he was in penalizing us for sucking at being language learners. So that did turn my view of language learning. That was a turning point for me. So that was number 2, was Italian, which I think was a semester or 2. I forget what the requirement was. And then later on, I think it was a semester, because then I moved to California and went to a community college there, which had similar rules, and my Italian transferred over, but I needed a year and I only had 1 semester, so I took Spanish. And I do not remember those classes at all. So I'm guessing it wasn't horrible and it wasn't great, but why did I take it? It was a requirement, and I found myself around a lot of Spanish language, and I thought that might help. Me learn it. And let's be honest, there were a lot of cute guys that were speaking Spanish, and I thought that would be kind of cute if I could use that to help learn a language as well. So that was those 3. Were there any others? I tried to learn Chinese when I moved to Taiwan. I'm trying to think chronologically. That was 2003. And when I went to Argentina, 2004, 2005, I fell into studying Spanish because the Italian lace Spanish around me was so beautiful. I wanted to study that and to be able to communicate with, again, the cute boys around me, but also anybody, because people were very, very, very friendly. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm in a wonderful city, and there's a language around me that I want to learn. And that's when it really, really hit me that language is to communicate, not just to do grammar exercises. And that made me really excited about language learning. However, the difference between what was spoken outside and what we were studying in the classroom was really disconnected, which it probably has to be at that beginner level, but it really discouraged me because I couldn't use anything. I couldn't even order anything in a restaurant because it was so different. I wish they had tailored it more to Buenos Aires, which is where I was, in the classroom. So I only went for, I think, a month in a small classroom, probably one of my most productive language learning environments. Classroom-wise, because there were only 2 students and 1 teacher, and we got tons of practice time, tons and tons and tons of practice time. So that was going back to Spanish, which is one of the first 3 languages I tried to learn. I've never, to this day, yet, gotten what I would consider fluent in any language, but I do know bits and pieces of all of those languages even today. Less so for German, but in Chinese and Spanish, there are things that have not left my head, even not using them for years and years and years. What languages did you study? Why did you start them? We did that. Number 4, how does your personality affect how you learn languages? I feel like that's kind of the heart of what my channel, Changing Scripts, has turned into, because I didn't realize how much my personality was affecting my lack of language learning until I tried to language learn, similar to what Shannon was saying in her video, when I tried to learn by myself. And when I say by myself, I mean via the internet and via mobile phone apps, because I would make so much more progress I have made so much more progress using these tools and asking questions as they came up organically to people within the language learning community than I did in a classroom where the teacher would say, hold that thought for a minute, or, which I've said as a teacher too, not blaming them, but I was able to get be so much more productive and feed my own language curiosity. And that's when things stick, right? Is when you connect them, or when you think about them, when you have questions with them. So, so my language, my personality didn't, at least as a young adult, and well, no, because I've been in classrooms since then, my personality is kind of too loud to fit in a language learning environment, which makes me ponder. Like, I'm thinking about taking a class in January in Shanghai, where I live now, and I really wonder if I can, because now, having been able to tap into a bigger language learning community via the internet while I'm learning and making this channel, can I go back into a classroom and under somebody else's language learning methods, and will address things as they come up for the group kind of mentality, which you have to do in a class, but for me it doesn't really work. So to answer the question, I don't know if I can take classes again. It affects my language learning immensely, probably more than any other cognitive limitation, because I need to have questions answered when I have them. I've turned into that kind of student. Number 5, do you prefer to learn languages in a class or individually? Individually for progress, but it is kind of a lonely process, so, which is the reason I'm thinking of taking a class. So for company, to go through the ups and downs of language learning, I would really like to be in a class right now. But for learning, for community, I prefer classes. For learning, I prefer learning individually, which is kind of a false label, because learning individually means I'm tapping into resources that people have made for people learning individually, and communities online via Twitter or YouTube or anything like that, where I'm picking the brains of people who have already gone through this. So individually is kind of a misnomer anyway. But yeah, so community, in-person community for classes, and individually with lots of help from people online for actual learning and processing the language. What are your favorite language learning materials? Oh my God, I have so many. It's ridiculous. I need to make a list, because I'm doing a conference in a couple of weeks at NYU, and I need to make a list to show how many I've stumbled across. Some I used for a short period of time, and some I used for a long stretch of time. Chinese specific. Okay, first, non-Chinese specific. I really like what Duolingo is doing. I know they have some weird phrases in there, but the fact that they've made language learning, speaking, reading, listening, and vocabulary and all of that in that tiny little package with repetition and sounds and exercises, and making it easy to do every day, is such a huge progress compared to previous materials. And my hat goes off to them. I would work for them in a second, maybe 2 seconds, because I think they're in Pittsburgh and it's not my favorite city, but I would work with it. Anyway, the point being, I really like that kind of app. I love mobile apps. Oh good, I'm not recording on my phone. So I can tell you some of my favorites for Chinese specifically. For tracing, so when you first start learning Chinese, learning to trace the characters, even when you don't know what the characters are, is really helpful in demystifying and getting to become comfortable with the Hanzi characters, the Chinese characters. And so I found that, where is it? It's not on my first page right now because I've moved on from it, but Chinese Writer by TrainChinese.com. I found that their app, which works with HSK1 vocabulary, so you're kind of hitting two things at once. You're getting used to the characters and you're getting that first round of vocabulary that a lot of people study. That app was just, it gamifies, and I did an entire video on it. I'm sorry to keep referencing my own site, but I've done a lot of videos in the past 4 months. But it gamifies the tracing of the characters, and it really, really, really demystifies them in a way that makes learning them for meaning and sound and all of that a lot easier. So that's number one. Number two is Pleco, which I'm sure everybody talks about for the Chinese. It's a dictionary, but they also decompose the characters. They'll take the different components of the character and break it down and tell you what those mean. And so you'll be able to see how the radicals build up to the characters that turn into different words and have different sounds. And it's a very, very cool way to do that. You can also put your phone on some characters and it will translate for you. It's got so many different features. It's really hard to go into in a short video. Oh, what I thought was a short video. So there's those two definitely for sure. I do like, what is this one? There's an Audio Trainer Lite that I'm using, and I don't know who uses this. Oh, that's also Train Chinese. They make a lot of good Chinese language learning mobile apps. I will say that for sure. Pinyin Trainer, I think, is also theirs. It is a wow. Chinese Skill is also, it's Duolingo-esque, and it's also super cute. Anyway, I have a lot of mobile apps, but to be honest with you, on Instagram, Learn Chinese with Eva is one stream where she does like a phrase a day, and she'll go over it again, and it's in this short chunk of maybe 15-20 seconds, and it's a really good way to get functional language. I really like that. I'm taking the Sensible Chinese language learning course right now with Kyle, who struggled through his own Chinese language learning, and I really appreciate how he is layering the language that way. So there is that as well. And my last one I will mention is also a website. Oh no, there's two I'll mention. My computer just froze. The stinks. Here we go. Hanzicraft, Hanzicraft, has a lot. Yeah, my computer's frozen. Has a lot of information on the characters, on the radicals, and I can't get to it right now. I believe they also have the phonemic components in there too. So it's a really, really good reference for learning Chinese, both when you're first starting and as you progress and want to know more. I am going to add one book. I'm going off screen. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for this because I completely forgot, but I love these books. They're by Sinolingua. By a gentleman named Zhang Peng, and I only have some of the books. There's a complete series, and I did some videos on them too, but the most common Chinese radicals, this book is awesome. I used that at least for 2 months, just kind of going through and looking at all the different things. There's an intensive spoken Chinese one. I'm not actually going to hit that for a few more months, but I wanted to buy it because it's so awesome. And the one I'm going to work on sooner than the spoken one is Rapid Literacy in Chinese, all by the same gentleman, broken down in a really, really easy to use way. And I'm in China, and these are maybe, depending on the book, $3, $4, $5 each. I don't know what they are if you order them outside of China. And that's by Sinolingua Press. So those are really good. So those are my main favorite resources. I have more, and if I've missed anybody that I really like, I'm so sorry, but those are the main ones that I like. I like digital apps the most because my lifestyle, I'm moving around a lot for my day job, so those work really well for me. And it's not just that, I really like learning in micro bursts, in those small 5-10 minute chunks throughout the day. Okay, that was my favorite question by far. I love looking at different materials. Did I mention I was a language teacher for over a decade? So being a language learner is sort of a blessing and a curse right now because I have all of that information in the back of my head. I will wrap this video up. Here we go. I have 4 more. Okay, number 7, how much time do you spend actively learning per day or per week? Other than this week and last week, when I've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit, I was spending, it's really hard to say because I do those tiny chunks throughout the day and then I see the language everywhere I go. But so actively learning, I would say I was doing 2 to 3 hours a day, easy, hands down, easy. The past week and a half have been zero. So, and that's changing today, but there's a whole video about that too. So, yeah, and I've been doing that for months. When I would first find an app, I would fall down a very big rabbit hole and just play with that for a really long time, and that would progress my language learning as well. Yeah. So, a lot of time. What are your short and long-term language learning goals? Short-term goals are to get back and doing daily tasks. I want to get, in my Sensible Chinese online course that I'm doing, he's working more with words than just, I've been working with radicals and the components of a character, and I think that's why I've fallen off as I've gotten bored. So I want to work more with words. And one of my long-term goals, I'm going to do the long-term and come back to the short-term. One of my long-term goals is learning to read Chinese newspapers. Now by long-term goal, I mean that's going to take me a couple of years to read even just a tiny snippet. It's apparently incredibly challenging, which is part of the reason I want to do it. The other part is just to get a perspective on the world that's incredibly different than my own. And I love reading, so I figured I'd pair those up and to speed up my, not to speed up, but to match my language learning goals with what I enjoy doing with languages, with the language that I'm fluent in, which is English. So to backtrack, I want to work on it through that course, learning more words, not just individual components, so that I can start to look at newspaper articles now, and pick out words that I know. Written Chinese is all clumped together without spaces, and it really overwhelms me. So getting some more vocabulary in actual words, not just radicals, not just parts of words, will help me get more comfortable with the lack of spacing. And so I think even just finding a word here and there within an authentic article will be a big return on motivation for me, and will build me to reading entire sentences and paragraphs and hopefully entire articles in the future. So I'm keeping the end in mind, the end being reading newspaper articles and coming back to how many words can I identify. Can I read titles in a few months? You know, that would be huge progress. Not a side goal, one of the reasons why I started to learn Chinese is I want to create mobile apps for learners, very functional, very specific language learning targets to help people maneuver around Chinese cities. So for expats living in places like Shanghai or Beijing or those kinds of places, so they could be autonomous users of the language without being completely fluent, so that they can get some language under their belt. Well, because a lot of expats, let's face it, are very, very, very busy working. So if you can get tiny bits of the language in without having to study in a university or on a course for months and months and months, I think that would be very useful. So anyway, so I want to read newspapers in Chinese, and I want to create very functional, tiny kind of those microburst language learning mobile apps. I don't do very quick long-term goals. I am a dreamer. I understand how much time both of those will take, and I've got the time. Where am I? Number 8. Did that. Number 9. What is your favorite language? There's an ancient Chinese phrase, I think it's a Zen Buddhist phrase or something, called mu, which is unask the question. Mu. Number 10. What is the next language you want to learn? Whew. Learning computer coding to a point where I could get things to work and get databases to send information from a spreadsheet to a website was the thing that finally got me to be comfortable with a different script like Chinese. Now, since I am more comfortable with those characters, in addition to wanting to go back to my Spanish and filling in the gaps there, I think Arabic might be, now that I think of it, because that is another different script. And now that I can stress my way through and push through patiently alternate scripts to get to language, to get to communicating, and to get to see a different viewpoint through a different script, I want to learn a third different script. So I do want to, once I get to a comfortable language learning level in Chinese, I'll incorporate Spanish back in, but that I can do via media and whatnot, because there's a pretty solid elementary base there, at least in receptive skills. So I can do that, and I think bring in Arabic as well. But that, we're talking years from now, because it's going to take me a while to get Chinese up to that level. But I would like to learn in that script as well. I really would. I like the idea of learning via reading, which is something that I didn't realize until a few months ago. And if I had learned that back in my earlier language learning days, I think I could have progressed sooner. I'm a much more visual language learner than I initially thought. So Arabic, but with Spanish and Chinese going on in the background. Because for some reason I now think I'm a polyglot when I'm still only monolingual. Again, I'm a dreamer. Last question, 11. What advice can you give to new language learners? Oh man, so much. And at the same time, I don't feel like I'm in a place where I can give advice to language learners yet, even though as an ex-language teacher, I gave advice every day. That's not really an answer. Know that even though your language teachers will not talk about the explicit process of language learning, there are ups, there are downs, there are plateaus, and there are times you want to quit. If you just keep going, even if you touch the language 5 minutes a day, you will eventually progress. You will. You just will. Nobody, here's a really bad like triple negative or something. Nobody doesn't learn their first language because we have to, because it's a survival thing. We just learn what we need to. We do. If you chip away at something, you will get there. Will you be as fluent as, and pick somebody ridiculously fluent or ridiculously good in the language? Nah, maybe not. But we don't need 5 billion polyglots in the world who are able to speak 20 languages. We need people who can, this is going to be a bit soap box-ish, but we need people who go outside of their comfort zone and go outside of their viewpoint. And we need people who can function in a different language and think in a different language, because it's almost impossible to learn a different language and not take on a bit of a viewpoint of that language and of the people who speak and read that language and write that language. So we need people who, even if it's only at a certain level, are able to hold different languages in their head and different cultures and different viewpoints in their head. So know that if you chip away at it every day, you will get to a point that you want to, or you at least will progress and push through the plateaus, because it is really worth it. Really, really worth it, because those different viewpoints come with people. That's where they exist. And being able to talk to people or write to people, whether it be via a messaging app or an email or in person or via an online video platform or whatever, being able to talk to people and share different viewpoints and different ideas on things is what keeps us, I don't even want to say tolerant, but what keeps us talking to each other and what keeps the world a gooey, wonderful place. I have to believe that. So just push through. There will be moments that it completely and utterly sucks. I'm in one of those moments right now. I am totally immersed in those moments right now. And if you've ever had gym guilt, where you buy a membership and you go for a while and then you don't go, and then the guilt of not going is why you're not going. Yeah, I think there's a similar thing in language learning. I'm in it right now. Push through it. Do whatever you can to push through it, because just keeping going will get you where you want to go. And once you get there, the reward is communicating with other people and other cultures and the mind explosions that inevitably will come from that. It just will. And if you don't like talking to people, you can read stuff from other cultures, which is part of what I'm doing. Not because I don't like people, but because I tend to be a more visual learner. And once I can read something, it's easier for me to remember it, to be able to speak it. So there's that. The second tip, I'm sorry, this one's really quick, is that knowing that if you're in a language learning class, not everybody learns the same, and you can still utilize the advantages of the class and still do your own thing in your own time in a way that helps you. For example, if I do take a class in January, I know that I will take whatever that teacher is good at helping us with, and I will do things on the side that will help me. I guarantee you there'll be more speaking than there will be reading. So I'll probably end up doing a lot more vocabulary on my own than we do in the class, and I will probably use the class more for like speaking and input and practice and things like that. So you can balance out what you need with the classroom. It just takes some effort. But the community within the classroom is something that's really hard to replicate when you're studying alone. So know that you can work out a classroom environment even if it seems like maybe you can't. And it can be useful. Oh, that was the last one. Whew, saved. Okay, so who am I tagging? Not a language learning vlogger necessarily, but I really want to tag Lena around because she did learn language in China, in Beijing. And I haven't warned anybody that this is happening, so I hope... Oh! No. So Lena Around is her YouTube name. And she does a lot of cultural videos and a lot of, she did do some videos on learning language, which is why I'm nominating you. And she has so many different kinds of videos, and she's been vlogging for a long time and just really awesome. So Lena, you've been tagged. And the other person I want to tag, hold on, my computer's stuck for a second. I'm going to pause.
Hello there, and welcome.
Okay, the second person I want to nominate is Ophelia Vert. She is for sure one of my biggest language learning vlogging inspirations. She has some really creative, very fun, very interesting vlogging. Sorry, I'm looking at my screen when I should be looking at you. Hi! She has some amazing videos on her language learning experiences. And she's a character. She's like a dramatic, interesting person, it appears, at least in vlog form. So Ophelia, I don't really know you, but I'm tagging you anyway. Yay! I hope both of you take this and run with it. And if you have done this or a similar thing before, I do apologize. I am new to this kind of video, and I am new to this, relatively new to this community, but Lena and Ophelia are people that inspire me in the vlogosphere and in the language sphere. You're both thoroughly fluent and eloquent as far as my ears know in the languages that you're speaking, and I am uber jealous and inspired all at the same time. So that's why I am tagging you in this type of video. Thank you again to Shannon, sorry. Shannon at Eurolinguiste for tagging me 2 years post making her video. And yeah, so Lena and Ophelia, you have to tag 2 people when you do your video. So have fun with that. And for all of you that have lasted through this entire 32-minute experience, thank you so much. I am an overtalker and an overwriter and an over-expressing person. I express too much all the time. This is why vlogging is great. I have a platform for analyzing my language learning experience. And if I can add that to the third tip for the new learners, is have someone to talk about your language learning experience with. We do a lot of language skills in the classroom, but we don't necessarily analyze the language, and talking through what you're going through helps so much in solidifying your learning. So, especially, well, if you are that kind of person, I am that kind of person. If you are, find a place, find a community of people to talk about your language learning with, because it does really, really help, especially when you hit plateaus and awful weeks like I was in last week, where I just hit walls upon wall, wall upon wall upon wall. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this kind of video, or check out one of my language learning videos also. I do some language learning walkabout videos where I go out into the wild in Shanghai and other places in China, and I touch big characters, big Chinese characters, and try to guess what they mean. And hopefully over time I'm getting better. I am getting better, but slowly by slowly. So there's those kinds of videos, there's these introspective kind of videos, and hopefully eventually I'll have some interviews with other language learners that have gotten farther than I have so far, and hopefully we'll be able to see me progress to a point where I'll be fluent enough to